Just enjoy the immersion of being in that place at that time and recording it in your sketchbook. Hey sketchy friends, so today we're going to talk about common mistakes that people make when they're starting to learn urban sketching. So I'm just going to point out a few of them, and it may be helpful for you to be like, okay, I'm doing that, maybe I should try doing something else, or just being more cognizant of pitfalls that you might be falling into. So the first one that I want to mention is overthinking, which I'm so guilty of, and perfectionism, which I'm not guilty of actually. The mistake here is trying to make a perfect and detailed sketch on your first attempt. You're just setting yourself up to fail here. No one can be a beginner at anything, pretty much, and go in and do something really, really well their first time. So to have that expectation of yourself, you're just setting yourself up for failure. So the solution here is to actually embrace the imperfections and focus on capturing the essence of the scene, maybe not going for something so complicated, scaling things down a bit, focusing on certain areas of a scene. And also, it's just overall the mindset of appreciating that sketching is a form of expression, and it's about the whole process and not just the technicalities of drawing something really, really well. So yeah, sketching is about expression and not perfection. So just keep that in mind. Another pitfall, which I think could go both ways really, but I'll say it this way first, is just ignoring basic drawing skills. So kind of brushing past things like perspective and proportion and things like that, just to get straight into the drawing. On the flip side, I do believe people can get quite hung up on these things, and they're like, no, I must understand perspective like absolutely perfectly before I can even possibly consider drawing anything. So I think it's a double-edged sword, but getting hung up over needing to be able to draw perfectly before starting to stretch yourself, or conversely, just ignoring basic fundamental drawing skills and just going straight into your sketch. So there is something to be said for just spending a little bit of time on understanding at least 1 and 2 point perspective. Those are pretty much the ones you'll use more often, mainly 2 point perspective, I would have thought, but then being prepared to jump off that ledge and then just actually going for it as well, and not kind of staying in that I must be able to draw technically perfectly before moving on. I would say invest some time in drawing exercises. I found when I decided I wanted to learn to draw properly in my mid-20s, I bought myself a book. A lot of people like the Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain by Betty Edwards. I have not actually ever looked at that book, but the one that I bought was The Keys to Drawing by Bert Dodson. And I studiously, which is really surprising for me, I studiously worked through that book. I did the exercises, I did the still lifes of the pepper and the corkscrew and the shoes, and I went through all the exercises. And you've got to kind of go through that, but don't get stuck in that phase. You don't need to spend a year doing that. You need to spend like some good time doing those exercises and then move on. So I'm really enjoying this particular learning path over at Skillshare. Level up your drawing and dynamic sketching. 5 hours and 43 minutes worth of tuition here, 4 classes curated by Skillshare. So these new learning paths are great. There's where Skillshare have curated different classes from across the platform and put them into kind of like a curriculum. For this one, there's refresh your line work skills, which maybe I wouldn't have found by myself. But this next one is simplifying complex shapes, and this is by James Richard. I definitely watched this one. This is an absolutely fantastic class, so I highly recommend that. And then we move on to capturing gestures and movement, and then finally building your sketchbook habit by Mike Lowry, who's also a fantastic teacher and has some great classes on the Skillshare platform. So it's really handy that they've now put these kind of classes together in learning paths, so that I don't have to go and look for connected classes and search across the entire library. They're all right here for me to watch one by one, and it just makes for a better kind of experience. So I highly recommend that. If you want to try it out for yourself, then I do have a special link which you can find in the description below, and the first 500 people will get 1 month free of Skillshare. you can do a lot of learning in 1 month. See, this is 5 hours and 43 minutes. I reckon you can fit that into a month of free Skillshare. And if anything, just watch this one because it's absolutely amazing. So thanks very much for Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Really, really appreciate it. Do click the link below, do go and check it out and let me know what you think. Another common pitfall is using the wrong materials. So again, when we start any activity, you know, we fall into different camps. Some of us want to buy all the stuff and have all the stuff, and we never actually get to the doing of the thing. And other people fall into the other camp where they don't want to spend too much money because they're not sure if they're going to like the activity. So they're just going to skate by with the cheapest, most minimalist kind of options and just see where they go from there. So I think it's probably best to be somewhere in the mid ground. You don't need to spend a lot to do urban sketching, which is what's amazing about it. But when you at least start to add watercolor into the mix, that's when just a little bit of investment in your materials is going to really make a big difference. And I always think about it in terms of beginner musical instruments, because that's the experience that I had, you know, growing up, is having, especially guitar for some reason, like just having the worst like nylon string classical guitar that costs like $50 and the strings are like that far off the neck and it's just like impossible to hold down the strings. And you know, there was nothing pleasant about that experience. It just made me want to quit, you know, immediately. So it's the same with watercolors. You know, I see sometimes people out with the children's craft watercolor pans that are like £2 and like these tiny little brushes with barely any hairs on them. And it's like, guys, you're just not going to be able to do anything pleasing with that. It's going to be a horrible experience for you. And it's just not going to be good. So what you can do is you can spend $30 on a decent set of watercolors. You can get two decent brushes, a pen and a waterproof pencil, and a sketchbook that can deal with watercolor. And you know, something like brands like Sea Whites of Brighton, Pink Pig, which are a British brand, but they also make very inexpensive but handmade watercolor sketchbooks. You really don't need anything too expensive, but don't just use normal sketchbook paper and craft or children's materials. It's when it comes to watercolor especially, it's just not going to be pleasing. So if you can make those little investments into your materials and get like, you know, reasonable mid-grade stuff, then it's going to make your learning experience so much more enjoyable. Okay, so another thing to think about is light and shadow. I see a lot of people not considering light and shadow. I understand they just want to focus on the actual drawing of things. But as soon as you introduce just a little bit of tone, a little bit of highlights and shadows, it really brings the overall sketch to life, and it can bring depth and interest. When you're thinking about urban sketching, a key time of day to avoid is noon, because the sun is right up ahead and therefore the shadows aren't as interesting as they could be. The short shadows. So try and sketch like in the morning or later in the afternoon, and you know, find a subject that's very interestingly lit, that's got nice clear highlights and shadows, and practice doing that. Don't go for something super complicated. Try and find like a building with some nice simple shapes or something like that, and practice your lights and shadows and spend some time on this, even if it's just in pencil or pen with hatching or something like that. And then also, you know, moving on to watercolor or whatever medium you prefer. But as soon as you start introducing the lights and shadows, that is what's going to make your sketch 3D and dimensional. So don't ignore them. Another thing I want to mention, which could be tipping into more of an intermediate skill, but is negative space. And I think it's something that's really beautiful and that can really lift your sketch immediately, is if you can appreciate leaving some white space or some negative space. So I've got a lot of videos here on YouTube about white space and negative space, also about minimalist urban sketching, which I think would be quite interesting as a beginner for you guys to check out. So lots of inspirational videos on that. I'll pin one of them to the top corner here so you can check it out, and you'll see some of my favorite urban sketches that utilize so much white and negative space in their sketches, and just how much more powerful it makes a sketch look. So if you're really interested in that kind of style and technique, then do check it out. But it is something to really bear in mind with your sketching. You can cover the whole page and you can be quite maximalist, and I've got sketches that I really love that do that. But introducing some white or negative space into your sketch can make it look really, really powerful as well. Another mistake I see is people really overcomplicating scenes. I think there's quite a skill in learning to simplify things. I guess you could also look at this in the minimalist urban sketching thing that I was just talking about. Learn to simplify what you see, because if you're gonna put in every last detail, it's just gonna make the sketch so busy, there's gonna be no focal point. And when you look at it or other people look at it, you're just not going to know what's going on. There's a key skill there in learning how to simplify things, editing out certain things that don't serve the sketch or that's just going to confuse the eye. Simplifying things is not a bad thing. It's not something that you're not allowed to do. Think about how you can record something in front of you in a simpler way using geometric shapes, simple shapes, and excluding anything that you think makes it look too busy. Also, I see people start with just really complex scenes, like street scenes where there's just stuff everywhere, there's no real focal point, that kind of thing. You know, a lot of people are used to taking photos now, so think about what you would choose to focus on if you were taking a photo. You don't just take photos, blah, 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 like here's the stuff around me. You look through the viewer or through the screen and you're like, what is interesting about this photograph? What is the focus? What is the thing that I'm taking the photograph of? Apply that to your sketching as well. You know, it's difficult when you are sketching on location because you can see everything and there's no edges. So even when you're starting out, if you want to take a photo just to understand where the edges of your sketch, where you want them to be, then you can do that and it can help you as a visual aid. There's nothing wrong with doing that. You're training your brain to kind of see subjects in a frame. So, you know, if you want to get your phone out and do that just to understand where you want to place things in your frame, in your sketch, then just absolutely go for it. But start with smaller things. And I talk about this in my book as well, A Beginner's Guide to Urban Sketching. There's no harm in just sketching things like street furniture. It's the first module in my Sketchy Adventures online course as well. We just do a sketch of road signs. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that actually such a mundane subject actually makes a really, really cool sketch. So don't be afraid just to hone in on something like a street lamp, then with a bit of background information or a few little faint buildings in the background. Something like that can make a really cool sketch and it doesn't overwhelm you, and it's a really good entry point into sketching something on location. Over time, you'll build up to be able to sketch entire scenes. But you have to walk before you run. It's like starting anything. You have to start with the small basic steps and build up progressively. So this totally leads into my next point, which is rushing the process and trying to finish a sketch quickly without taking the time to really just observe and enjoy the process. I do think urban sketching is a really mindful activity. You're there in the moment. You're not thinking of anything else other than drawing what's in front of you. So really enjoy that process and don't rush through it just to see what you can do and what the end result is, because it's so much more enjoyable when you just slow down and savor the experience. You pay attention to the details, you can take breaks, you can talk to the person next to you if you're out sketching with a group. Just enjoy the immersion of being in that place at that time and recording it in your sketchbook. Now, I'm not sure if this is really a mistake or not. I feel it's a bit harsh to label it as a mistake, but think about experimenting with different styles. This is literally my most favorite thing about urban sketching and about sketching as a whole, is I just love, love, love to experiment. I look at what other people are doing. I'm like, oh, how are they doing that? What techniques are they using? You know, check out video like this one, which is collage and urban sketching. That's super, super fun. Just immerse yourself in all the different styles that are around. Think about which urban sketches you really like and go and learn from them. They all have so many classes. This is such a great time to be learning something like urban sketching. It's just exploded in popularity. Like there's classes everywhere, there's free stuff on YouTube, you can join Skillshare, you can take classes for under $10 on Domestika from people like Felix Scheinberger and Lapan and Inma Serrano. It's like mind-blowing, you know? And then look at Ian Fennelly, he's got a whole platform, a whole suite of online courses. And then on top of that, you can join people for travel sketching vacations as well. So for example, I'm leading one in April in Spain. There's just a whole world of opportunity out there to learn from people at all different price points, from free right up to, you know, the travel sketching vacations, which aren't cheap. So figure out who your favorite urban sketchers are, which styles you like, and go and learn from those guys. And I can guarantee you over time, your tastes will develop as well. And maybe you'll end up liking stuff that you really don't like right now, which is kind of what happened to me over the last few years. Follow that, follow your interests. If you want a jumping off point, I can really recommend my Pinterest board for free. You can go and check it out. It's an urban sketching board. There's loads of different styles there, all separated out into different sections. So just go and have a scroll and have a browse and see what you like, and you can make a Pinterest board and pin the favorite things that you like on there. Also, there's 2 amazing books. One is The Art of Urban Sketching by Gabby Campanario, who came up with the whole urban sketching label and concept. And then that was a good sort of 10 years ago now. And most recently, last year, Stephanie Bauer brought out the next book in that kind of series, I guess you could consider it, called The World of Urban Sketching. Those are 2 lovely big books, and they feature sketches from urban sketchers all over the world. So I highly recommend those 2 books. And yeah, just immerse yourself and have fun and check out what everyone's doing. It's just really is amazing. Obviously, you can look on Instagram as well, at the Urban Sketchers profile and tags and all that stuff. So the final point I would like to make, and I am definitely guilty of this, is avoiding challenges. So avoiding challenging elements like perspective, people, or moving objects. I definitely have been avoiding people for a very long time. I'm starting to get there. I'm starting to try and include them or focus on them sometimes much more regularly. So, you know, when we avoid things like this for a long time, then it kind of becomes this kind of block, you know. So I encourage you to just, once you've got hold of the basics and stuff, do stretch yourself and do sketch dogs that are running around in the park, or sketch people who are moving around a lot, or go for that really tricky interior perspective of like some kind of church roof or something. You know, just go for it. What's the worst that can happen? You just kind of come out with like some funny sketch, but at least you tried, you know. And the more you try, just like anything, the more you try, the more you practice, the more you learn, the better you get, etc., etc., etc. So stretching ourselves outside of our comfort zone is really when we start to get better at something and we start to learn more. So don't avoid those challenging subject matters like I do sometimes. Stretch out of your comfort zone, and one day you're going to start nailing it. Cool, so thanks for watching this video, guys. I hope it's given you some inspiration on how to move forward with your urban sketching. I've got a lot of resources over on urbansketchingworld.com. I've got my book, The Beginner's Guide to Urban Sketching, that's come out. I've got an online course. I've got loads of stuff. Check out all the information in the links. I'm always available to answer your questions. You can just email me, taria@urbansketchingworld.com. I do my best to reply to everything I receive as quickly as possible. And come and join me in Spain in April 2024. And if you're watching this in the future, then I'm sure I have something else on offer that you can check out as well. Just check out the links below, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks very much for watching.